Hello and welcome to Magda Knits. My name is Magda and I'm coming to you from the southeast of England, and this is my little space where I talk about all of my knitting, yarn spinning and occasionally some yarn dyeing. If you are new here, welcome. I hope you will enjoy what you see, and if you are a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. There is something that I really quickly wanted to address at the beginning of this episode. I have noticed that under my previous video, some of your comments got deleted by YouTube. The reason why I know it is because I use the YouTube Studio app. So essentially it's a place where you've got all of your videos in one place and all the comments are visible in there as well. And the way the comments are displayed, you just see a list of them and you see the beginning of each of them. Once you click on the comment, then you can read the whole thing. So some of these comments I could see that they're there, but once I clicked on them, YouTube told me that this comment is deleted. It's no longer available. So I couldn't like it, I couldn't reply. It's just gone, and I really tried to do some research to find out how you can see them, how you can get them back. There is no such option, it seems like they're lost. So I really wanted to apologize to anyone who left a comment under my previous video. If you haven't got a response or if I haven't acknowledged your comment in any way, then I really apologize, but it's YouTube to blame. Your comment is most likely gone. So I hope it's not going to discourage anyone from commenting, because I really like reading your comments. So yeah, I can only apologize, I'm sorry. But yeah, let's get to this episode because I've got quite a few things that I wanted to show you. So today I would like to show you the finished object, which I'm wearing. I will show you another finished object that I have. I've got a work in progress, and the rest of the episode is going to be quite spinning, fiber processing, fiber dyeing heavy. I recorded a little video where I was documenting the little journey, if you like, of how I was cleaning the fiber that I was preparing for spinning. So if this is what you're interested in, that will be available towards the second part of this video, I guess. But I always include timestamps in all of my videos, so if there is any content that you would like to skip, then you can find it in the description below. So without further ado, let's talk about the top that I'm wearing. So this is the Why Not t-shirt that's designed by Rachel Ilsley, who is known as Unwind Knitwear on Instagram and on Ravelry. And it's a top-down construction with some lovely detail around the yoke, which at the same time also incorporates in a very clever way the increases around the yoke. The rest of the body is just plain stockinette stitch. You have a bit of edging here on the sleeves with similar detail that you've got around the yoke, and there is also a very similar edging on the bottom of the hem, which I will show you in a minute because I would like to speak a little bit in more detail about the hem. So that's the general construction. Now I do admit that I have knitted the yoke twice, because I have made some mistakes and I didn't realize that I wasn't adding some yarn overs. So this yoke is really cleverly constructed. It very much looks like crocheting, but it isn't. It is all very clever knitting stitches. So I have a tendency of knitting on a rather short cable when I'm working in the round. I like my stitches to be quite bunched up. But the downside to working like this is that very often you don't quite see the shape of the yoke as you are adding the increases. What I ended up with was very much like a straight piece of fabric, which I've got here anyway, so I'm going to show you what it ended up looking like. This was supposed to be the yoke, and it just ended up looking like a cowl. So yeah, it's just on one of those pattern repeats. I completely forgot to add the increases, and so I ended up with a straight fabric. It was really disappointing because I was heading towards the bottom. Unfortunately, I just had to start from scratch. I didn't rip it back. I will rip it back and I will repurpose the yarn. But yeah, this is what happened. But at the same time, when I made that mistake. I have also made a decision that actually I would like to change the needle size. So when I went to the pattern page and when I looked at the projects of other people, I was under the impression that on some of those patterns or some of the projects, I could see the fabric around here being a little bit puckered in comparison to the stockinette stitch. And I also thought about myself as a knitter, how I tend to work when I knit a new stitch. And everything that was happening here was mostly new to me. And I know that when I do something for the very first time, I tend to be a little bit of a tight knitter. So I decided to actually change the needle size at that point as well. So the pattern is calling, I think, for a 4mm needle. The gauge you're supposed to do for this pattern is across the stockinette stitch on a 4mm needle. I can't remember what the gauge was supposed to be. I know that I didn't hit the gauge, and I made a decision that I wanted to go for a 3.25mm to actually get closer to the gauge. I do admit I don't even know whether I hit that gauge. I just made a decision that I was so far off that I really needed to go down the needle size quite substantially, and I believed that was going to be enough. And it is, because it fits. But in terms of the gauge, I'm not entirely sure whether I'm on the gauge or not. So 325 was the needle size that I used on the stockinette body. However, for this section here, I was using a 3.5mm needle because I wanted this to be just a little bit looser in case I go a little bit too tight. But I think it all worked out very well. So I'm happy with the decision about the needle size that I made. Other things that happened along the way of knitting this as well. So I have made some modifications. Now, the modifications on the yoke that I did are actually also mentioned in the pattern. So when you look at the original picture of the sample that Rachel made, the depth of the yoke is going really low. And because you've got loads of see-through lacy situation here, I didn't feel comfortable with this going too far down. So the pattern is telling you how you can modify it to make it less deep. And this is what I did. So if you were to compare my version with the version of the sample, there are pieces around here, I believe. Somewhere around here where you have to do, in the original, you have to do, I think, around 3 rows of moss stitch. Here and there, but I decided just to do 1 row because I didn't want that much depth. What I did change on top of it, that wasn't mentioned in the pattern, but I just decided to do it myself, is when you look at the bottom here, the original pattern is actually, it has another of those repeats underneath. So you're adding another line of those holes. And I just didn't want to have all those holes going down. The initial idea was to be able to wear it without a vest underneath, because if it was going to go too far down, my brow would just be flashing and I would feel very uncomfortable about that. Unfortunately, as you can probably tell, I still couldn't achieve the design or the look that I wanted to have. This is for me still going too far down, and I'm wearing this with a vest underneath because I was just flashing my bra and I was feeling really uncomfortable about it. So if I was to make it again, I would probably try to modify it even more just to have it sit a little bit higher so I could wear it without the vest. Because for me, if I'm wearing a short-sleeved top, it means it's hot, the weather is nice outside, so I don't want to have layers. Right now I am literally boiling because I have a cotton vest underneath, so what's the point of having so many layers under a summer top? So that was a bit disappointing for me. I should have realized it, I guess, before. I did try it on before I moved on to the stockinette, and it kind of felt like maybe it was going to be alright, but I think I was just trying to convince myself. It's okay. I guess I'm just not going to wear it in the middle of summer when it's super warm. I might wear it when it's just a little bit colder, so I will wear a vest underneath and maybe like a cardigan on top. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, it's not a complete failure. Like, I still love it. I think it's a lovely t-shirt. So it's just a little bit unfortunate about how I ended up having it all here. Another thing that I had to fix and then later modify as well were the cast off edges. So what happens around the sleeves, when you add the border here, you are supposed to cast off in the lateral braid pattern. So the lateral braid is essentially, let me show you. It's like, this is one of them. So they're like stitches that actually run across like this. And you are supposed to cast off while you're doing this braid. Now I have realized that it was just absolutely flaring. It was so loose that it just looked horrible. I've got a picture of that sleeve before I fixed it. But what I decided to do at the end is just to put a little bit of elastic onto the bottom here, just to have it sit a little bit nicer around my arm. So I realized that right after I cast off, I could have probably undo it and then cast it off in another way. But at that point I made a decision that I will just insert the elastic and hopefully it would fix the problem. I think it does fix the problem. Maybe it's not the neatest edge, but I think it's not too bad. So as I was doing the other sleeve, I was kind of playing with the idea that perhaps instead of casting off while doing the lateral braid, I could perhaps just do a normal lateral braid and then do a cast off, a regular cast off edge below it. So I was playing with that idea, but then I decided against it because I just didn't want to have two different sleeves. I was worried that it was going to look too different to what I've got on this one. So I'm happy that I decided to stick to the idea of having this sleeve in exactly the same way as that one, because otherwise they would look completely different. Because I made a decision that I was going to cast off the row below on the edge of the hem. So this is what it looks like. I'm just going to get closer to show you what the edge looks like on the sleeve. So this was cast off in the lateral braid pattern, and after putting the elastic, this is what it looks like. But when it comes to the hem, just going to lift it a little bit. As you can see, it's much neater, but it has added almost like quite a bit of a length. Maybe I'm going to take a close-up just to show you the difference between the sleeve and the cast-off edge with an additional row below it. I think it looks really nice, but it adds a little bit of length, so I guess this is something to be mindful of. But yeah, I think the reason why it happened is I was doing this lateral braid really loosely, and then I remembered that I have made a lateral braid before on another pattern, and it was this cuff marker by Fiber Tales. And I remember that in that particular pattern, Lerke, who is the designer behind Fiber Tales, she even mentioned in the pattern to actually go down a few needle sizes when you're doing the lateral braid, because that tends to make the whole section quite loose. You just end up making those stitches really loose. And that made sense. So basically when I was doing the lateral braid and trying to cast off at the same time, those stitches were just way too loose to make it nice and tight and neat. I don't know how people manage to actually get those nice edges on their versions of the t-shirt. I looked at the images and they all looked nice, so I don't know if it was just me or if they changed the needle sizes. I haven't read their notes, but yeah, I guess that's something to be mindful of when you are making this pattern. Maybe it's worth to kind of play around with the swatch on different types of those stitches just to see whether you don't have too much of a difference in terms of the gauge, if you don't have any puckering or if nothing is flaring too much, because there is a lot going on here with those stitches in here. But overall, I'm very happy with this design. In my previous episode, while this was still a whip, I was also showing you the ladder situation at the back. So I really struggled to close the round. I don't know why, because you know, it was just knitting in the round. It wasn't magic loop or anything where normally you would end up with the laddering effect. I don't know, it's just looked really, really horrible. So I ended up with exactly the same problem on the sleeves and on the bottom hem, but I just did, I want to say duplicate stitch, but I didn't quite. I was completely improvising, just trying to close it from the outside, from the inside. I did all sorts of mambo jumbo, but I closed it. It doesn't look super neat, but I think it's not particularly horrible. So I'll try to show you what it looks like at the back. I can't tell whether you could see it or not, but yeah, there is no ladder at least anymore. You can see you can see where I was closing the stitches, but I guess that's easier for me now to find the front and the back. So yeah, so this is the pattern. I was knitting this in the Knitting for Olive cotton merino yarn. The colorway is called Rust. And yeah, just as the name states, it's a blend of cotton and merino. It's quite light. Any kind of fiber where you have a lot of content of cotton can be a little bit heavy, but this one doesn't feel particularly heavy. And I didn't use much of this yarn. I think I used around 170 something grams. I was knitting size small, so I used just under 4 skeins of this yarn. It's lovely. It's lovely to work with it, and hopefully it's going to wear nicely as well. This is the first time I'm wearing this top. I have finished it fairly recently. It finished drying literally last night, so I will report back on how it's wearing for sure. Let's get on to the second finished object. This was a very spontaneous cast on, and I have decided to make a pair of slippers. They look like nothing, but I'm holding them right here, but I will insert a picture of what they look like when I have them on my feet. As I said, it was a very spontaneous cast on, and it was very much prompted by the yarn that I have spun and I showed you in my previous episode. So that was the Masson Fiber, which I completely overspun. It was a very ropey yarn, and I wasn't really sure if I was ever going to use it because, as I say, it just ended up being very unpleasant. And one of the viewers kindly left a comment, which, by the way, wasn't deleted, yay. She said that she had a similar situation and she decided to use that yarn for making a pair of slippers. And that made absolute sense because at the end of the day, even if the yarn is unpleasant, it's not going to be like close to your skin because I'm planning to wear these on over socks in winter. And if the yarn is overspun, then it kind of adds to the durability, so it just makes sense to make slippers. So I was planning to use that Masson Fiber to make slippers, but then I looked into my stash and I found this yarn, which is also my hand spun. This was a yarn that I spun a while ago from Andean Wool Top. I have dyed that fiber myself. The color looked good in the braid, but as I spun this into singles, I started doing a 2-ply and it looked absolutely rubbish and horrible. I hated it. And then I just decided to do some chain plying instead, which ended up looking like a gradient color, which made this color so much nicer. But because it was one of the very first attempts of me trying chain plying, I pretty much messed it up, and this yarn is actually quite overspun. So again, it's a little bit ropey, not necessarily very pleasant, but the color is nice. And yeah, I just looked at this yarn in my stash and I was like, I just want to use it. And at that point I also realized that I have so much of my handspun yarn, and I've been spinning so much because I've been spinning for over a year now, and I have been using my handspun very, very little. It just all ends up in stash, and I can't seem to like make any good pattern decisions to start using my handspun. And at that point I decided that I really need to start knitting with my own yarn. So up until this point, most of the time when I was making decisions about just knitting in general, it was usually driven by seeing a beautiful pattern that I would feel completely inspired by, and then I would want to make it. So I would look in my stash, and then I would realize that I don't actually have any suitable yarn, so then I would end up buying more yarn. But now I want to do it the other way around. So I want to look into my stash, I want to feel inspired by the yarn, I want to pick up a skein and then find a project that's suitable for this particular yarn. So I will try to do it a little bit more consciously. Actually, my current whip is exactly what's happening. I'm using my Handspun and I have chosen the pattern based on the yarn that I have. I'm a very heavy Ravelry user and I have so many patterns saved in my favorites. So if I look at the yarn, if I know its weight, if I know how much yardage I have all the specs that I can put on the filters in Ravelry, and then I can get loads of patterns that I have saved in my favorites, and I wanted to make them anyway, so perhaps now it could be the time. So that's how I want to try to go forward with my knitting. I don't want to limit myself completely and say that this is the only way I'm going to knit forever now. If there is a beautiful pattern that catches my eye, then, you know, if I feel the urge that I want to knit it, then so be it. But I really do want to start making more conscious decisions about using my stash, and especially my Handspun. So this is one of the recent projects. It is a free pattern that I found on Ravelry. It's a very simple construction. So first it's essentially just a garter stitch, and there is a little bit of stockinette stitch here on the top of the foot. So yeah, you're just knitting a rectangle in garter stitch, and then you cast off, keep going here in stockinette. And then once you have the width of the foot that you like, then you cast on a bit more stitches here, continue with the rectangle, and then you close it off. So it's not any kind of sophisticated construction, and it's not the best fitting slippers either. Like, I'm pretty sure there are many patterns that are actually written in a different way or designed in a different way, so perhaps they sit around the foot a little bit better. But you know, this is just a simple free pattern. You can't expect too much of those, I guess. And it still fits, it's still okay, and I know I'm going to wear it a lot, so, or I'm going to wear them a lot. So yeah, very simple construction. I also forgot to mention that you do a little chain edging, like crocheted edge here, just to kind of nicely close it here and give a little bit more of a nicer finish around the opening of the foot. So yeah, a very spontaneous cast on. I'm not going to really wear these much at the moment because it's way too warm, but they are ready for winter. And yeah, it was a really quick knit because I made these in one evening. Can't remember what gauge it was at, but this yarn is quite thick. I think the original pattern is written for like a bulky weight or Aran. I can't remember, but it's definitely for something thicker. So that's my finished object number 2. And now let's talk about my current whip. So we're going to talk about it really quickly because I will talk in more detail about it when it's actually finished. This is just to show you what I'm currently working on. So I am finally using my Handspun yarn, the sweater quantity that I spun a while ago, and I am turning this into colorwork sweater. And for the contrasting color, I am also using my Handspun. This obviously wants to twist on itself, so I don't know how much of it you'll be able to see. Yeah, I think it shows the colorwork well enough. The pattern is Celosias? I can't remember. It's by Jennifer Steingass. I'm going to put the name on the screen. Jennifer Steingass is a very popular designer, and I have so many of her sweaters saved in favorites, and yet this is the first time I'm actually knitting one of her projects. So it did take a while, to finally cast on something by Jennifer, but I'm super happy that I did, because this is turning out really nicely. The yarn, as I said, that I'm using is my Handspun. So this is some kind of mysterious fiber that I have plenty of. I got it together with my wheel a year ago. I have no idea what sheep breed it is, but I've spun it into a 3-ply. And it's this grayish, brownish color that I decided to pair with this one. This is my Handspun as well. And it is actually one of my very, very early yarns. So it's very uneven. It's got loads of thin and thick pieces. But I felt like this was a good combination. I didn't really want to go for anything with a lot of contrast. I wanted something just a little bit more subtle, and I think this is a really good match. The light is changing, so I don't know what you're going to be able to see, but I'm happy with this combination. Okay, in this light you can't really see the contrast, but I'm pretty sure that you can actually see it on the yoke. Yeah, you can. So yeah, this is going nicely. Yeah, I will talk about it a little bit more in my future episodes, so you can treat it a little bit of a teaser. The only thing maybe that I do want to mention is that the thickness of this yarn is quite different. So let me show you. So this one is a little bit thicker than this, and I was a little bit worried about how this was going to turn out, but what I decided to do instead, I mean, I just obviously decided to go for it, but normally when I do color work, I tend to go up a needle size, or even sometimes 2 needle sizes for the color work section. What I decided to do in this case is, because the contrasting color is thicker and I knew it was going to add a little bit of bulk and it was going to make this section, because of that, it was going to make the section a little bit bigger, I decided to stick to the usual or the same needle size that I had on the stockinette. And I think it's working. So hopefully this is all going to work out well. And as I say, that's something we're going to talk about in my future episodes. So this is what I'm currently working on. And yes, this is all the knitting content that I have for today. And now I would like to move on to spinning and fiber processing, fiber cleaning, and fiber dyeing. So first I would like to show you one of my recently finished skeins. This is a Corriedale fiber that I have spun. It is a 2-ply yarn. It's undyed fiber, so this is the natural color. I got this fiber from Wingham Woolworks, and this is the light Corriedale fiber. And this is what it looks like. I am so proud of it. This is the thinnest I have ever spun, and at the same time I have spun it into a 2-ply, so this is really thin. I must say that it really reminds me of like the woolly knit, the British wool combs, in terms of thickness, and even in terms of like the angle of spinning or the twist. It looks really, really similar. So this is 97 grams, and I think I got nearly 550 meters. So this is quite thin. I would say it's like a light fingering weight. I have been quite consistent with my singles, and definitely the fiber helped with achieving this consistent yarn. It's so lovely to spin. I have heard so many good things about Corriedale, and now I understand why. It's because it's so easy to draft. I must say that if you are a beginner spinner, don't go for the merinos. Yes, they're soft and lovely. Go for Corriedale. It's also very pleasant. Okay, it's not the softest yarn I have ever made, but it's not unpleasant, and it's so great to work with. It's so easy to draft. And that's why I just went so thin. It just felt like this fiber wanted to be really thin. So I know I will be working with Corriedale a lot in the future. and this skein is going straight to my stash, but as I said earlier, I will definitely try to find a suitable project where I can use this lovely skein. So this was the recent finished yarns, and after that, after I finished spinning this, I decided to dive into the stash of the raw fleece that I have. So a year ago I got some Ryeland Fiber. I think it was washed before because it looked very, very clean, but it was very greasy, so I had to get rid of the lanolin. And I decided to make a little video of showing you the process of how I'm cleaning the fiber, and I'm gonna insert this video now. If it's not your jam, if you're not interested, feel free to skip. As I say, the timestamps are below. But after cleaning the fiber, I decided to then dye it and then spin it into some yarn. So I'm going to show you the results. I'm going to show you the fiber that I dyed as well. But yeah, let's look at the cleaning process first. So that's coming now. So we're in my garden. It's a bit of a breezy day, so I hope the sound is not going to be too bad, but it's the perfect weather because the breeze is going to help with drying the cleaned fiber. So this is a mesh bag, like a laundry bag, full of Ryeland fiber. I've got 100 grams in here. Now, the reason why I've got only 100 grams is because this bag is fairly small. I don't want to put too much fiber in here because I want the water to be able to penetrate the fiber really well and get in between all those fibers freely. Also, I'm going to be using quite a small bowl for this process as well. I don't have like a big vessel to process a bigger amount of fleece. I could use my kitchen sink for that, but I don't want to because I do not want to put the lanolin down my drain. I'll explain that, I guess, later on in the process. So what I've got here is, as I said, the Ryeland fiber. It's fairly clean, like I don't see a lot of dirt in it. It's quite yellow, but it's not going to change the color very much. There's a little bit of vegetable matter here and there, but that's going to be removed mostly during the carding process. So this fleece is in a pretty good state, but it's got a lot of lanolin in it. It's very greasy, so I need to wash it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this bowl, which is not particularly big. I don't even know how many liters it's going to contain, but it should be enough to deal with this 100 grams of fleece. So what I'm aiming for is I would like to have the water in about 60 Celsius degrees. I believe it's around 140 Fahrenheit if I remember correctly. So I'm just going to use my kettle to help myself with speeding up the process. So I'm just going to boil some hot water in my kettle, and I'm going to mix it with cold water, and hopefully we're going to achieve the temperature of 60 degrees Celsius. Okay, so I've got the bowl full of water. Let's check the temperature. Okay, so it's 60 degrees, which is what I was aiming for. So it is recommended that the water should be at least at 60 degrees Celsius. At this point, the lanolin will start to detach itself from the fleece. So what I'm going to use to clean my fleece is the Unicorn Power Scour. So this product has not been given to me. I'm not sponsored by anyone. I have decided to purchase it for my own money, and this was my own decision to do it. The reason why I've done it is because it seems to be fairly environmentally friendly. When you look at the ingredients list, it doesn't seem to have any kind of serious chemicals in it, and apparently it seems to be quite biodegradable, so high level of biodegradability, which is great. Yeah, so this is what I'm going to use. Now, in terms of how much to use, the packaging says that you should be using 1 tablespoon of this product for 2 gallons of water if you have 1 pound of raw fleece. Now, I don't have 1 pound of raw fleece. I have only 100 grams, so I'm not going to be particularly scientific here. I'm just going to pour a little bit of it. So I would say just that much. So one of the reasons why I wanted to go for it as well is that you don't really have to use much of it. It's very highly concentrated, so a very small amount can go a really long way. So yeah, I just used a tiny amount of it, and hopefully it's going to do the job. So I just went to get those rubber gloves because now I'm going to put the fiber in the water, and it is quite hot. And it's just going to protect my hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press the fiber gently into the water. I don't want to agitate it because we're dealing with hot water here, so it's very easy to felt the fiber. So I want to make sure that every piece is nicely immersed in the water. Okay, and now I'm going to just let it sit for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I'm going to take it out and I'm going to prepare another water bath, this time without the scouring agent, and I'm just going to rinse it. Now, if your fleece is particularly greasy, you could make another bath with a bit of power scour. My fleece is greasy, but I wouldn't call it ridiculously greasy, so I think one bath is going to be enough. And just a little disclaimer, I've done it before on another batch, and this is the second time I'm doing it, so I guess I know a little bit more about the fiber now, and it was perfectly enough to do it just once. So yeah, I'll see you soon. Okay, we had to move to my kitchen because the farmer came and he started to make an incredible amount of noise. We live on a farm, and yeah, every now and again there is a bit of noise. The farmer decided to clean the barns or something, I don't know. Anyway, I really wanted to proceed to the next stage because 20 minutes have passed and now I am ready to take out the fleece, and I just want to show you the water now, which got a little bit murky. I'm not sure if you can see it properly in the camera, but it's not clear water anymore. So that's your lanolin. The fleece itself wasn't so dirty, so it's not really dirt. This is just the lanolin. So I'm gonna take it out. And that's your water with the lanolin. Now, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it outside. It's because I do not want to put it down my drain. Lanolin is a type of fat, and you don't want to put any fat down your pipes. And especially here, we've got a little bit of a crazy situation here with the pipes, and they get clogged up anyway, so I don't want to add to the problem. So I will let this water cool, and then I'm just going to pour it down my flower bed in the garden. So lanolin is not dangerous for the environment. Now, when it comes to the Unicorn Power Scour, it says on the packaging it's biodegradable. I don't know how much we can trust it, what the manufacturer puts on the packaging, but personally I believe it's much better than putting down the drain, at least in this house. So this is what I'm going to do. So when this water cools down, I will put it in my garden, and what I'm going to do in the meantime, I'm going to prepare another water bath with hot water, and I'm going to put the fleece back into that water so it gets a little bit of a rinse, and then we'll be done with the process. Okay, so we're back in the garden now. It's nice and quiet again. So what I've got here is my fleece. It was sitting in clean water, so this time I didn't add any scouring agent. When I was putting this fleece in this bowl, the water was hot once again. So you don't want to be putting your fleece that first was sitting in hot water into a bowl of cold water, because that creates a shock and this could felt your fiber. So the water was hot again, but this time it was clean with no power scour. So it was sitting here for 20 minutes and now the water is pretty clear. it seems like all the lanolin got washed off. There might be still a little bit, but that's why we are rinsing it in clean water now. So now that this is ready to be taken out, I will be drying it. Okay, so we are now ready to dry the fiber. Different people use different techniques. I guess it's just a matter of what you really have and what works for you. So I've seen people spreading the fiber on like the garden furniture, if they have a bit of a mesh seat, for example. People dry their fiber on their children's trampolines. It all works. So you just work with what you have. What I have here is just a regular rack where I dry my clothes. And what I have on top of here, this is just like a chicken wire, kind of like a metal fencing. It comes like in just a square, so we would use it as a protection for our plants in the garden. And I've got two of those squares or rectangles. I tied them on the sides with cable ties, so I've got a bit of a space here. So I'm gonna put the fiber in between here just to spread it and lay it out flat so it can dry and it's not gonna run away in this wind. So just gonna let it lay here in between these metal wire fences. It's quite compact, this fiber. I'm just gonna try to spread it a little bit more. So this way it's going to hopefully dry quicker. And because this kind of likes to stay up, what I like to do is I'm just going to put some pegs just to close it so it doesn't get blown off. So kind of just close it like this. And I'm going to leave it here until it's completely dry. And this is the whole process then finished. And the fiber will be ready to card or dye, whatever it is that I wish to do with it. So yeah, this is how I am cleaning my fiber. I hope you found it interesting. If not, I'm sorry. But this is the fiber after it was cleaned. So this is the little cloud. It still has some dirt in it, but it's very difficult to get rid of everything completely. But the most important thing was for me that it wasn't greasy. So I had, I think, around 950 grams of this fiber. As I said in my video, I don't really have containers and vessels to do a lot of fiber processing, so I was doing it in little bits, and I still have plenty of that raw fleece that I still have to clean and dry and work with. But the first batch that I processed, I decided to card straight away in its natural color, and I dyed this in a bat. So after it was carded into a bat, I decided to dye it. I made 3 of those bats. I rolled them into like Swiss rolls, sausages, and I have put 3 of those rolled bats into a dye bath, and then I dyed it into some random colors. So I had 3 dyed bats, which I decided to strip into smaller pieces. I spun these into 3 singles, and then I turned these into this yarn here. So that's the first skein that I got from this Ryeland. Forgive the orange ties that you can see here. I forgot to reskein it and make it a little bit more presentable. But this is just to show you the color that I achieved. And the fiber itself is definitely not the softest, but it's not anything super itchy that would drive me mad. I would say it's something in between. This fiber is really bouncy, and I guess it makes sense because when I looked at, it's got a lot of crimp, so like when I look at the fiber in its natural form, it's really curly. So it naturally wants to bounce back, and I like this effect. I was spinning worsted style, but because it was prepared woolen, I guess, because it was prepared into a bat, I guess I ended up with the semi yarn. I never remember if it's semi woolen or semi worsted, but it was a bat that I was spinning worsted style. And yeah, this is the first skein that I had from this raw fleece. This is, I think, 90 grams, but I haven't checked the specs. I don't know how I ended up, like what kind of weight I ended up with, but it probably is something on a close to sport weight, maybe closer on a DK. It's a 3-ply, so after all, it is slightly thicker. And then I still had some of that clean fleece, and I decided to do something different. So with that, I decided to first dye it and then card it and then process it. So I ended up putting, you know, the cloud of fluff into my dye pot, and I started splashing some random colors. So I ended up with something that looks like this. So I think I used 4 different colors. I used yellow, orange, green, and brown. And I ended up with these random bits. And this is where things started to go wrong, because I have many random colors here. So what I decided to do is just to pick colors completely randomly and blend them on my carder. So the bat ended up looking a bit crazy. And at that point in time, I was still trying to convince myself that it's gonna be fine. So I made another bat, which I still have because I haven't spun it, and it looks like this. So it's got a lot of craziness in it, and it looks like as if it fell into a swamp. It's, yeah. I know, if you guys are experienced fiber processors, you know, if you work with fiber for a very long time, if blending is your thing, you are probably looking at this and you're thinking to yourself, like, what the hell have you done? I know, this looks horrible. But I thought, well, let me spin it and see what happens. So I started spinning this, and some of these colors looked okay-ish, but because there was so much going on in terms of color and there's a lot of blending, it all ended up being a little bit muddy, and the color repeats were really short. And the original idea was to make it into a 3-ply again, but at that point when I started spinning, I was thinking to myself, there is just way too much going on. This is just gonna look horrible. So even then, I think I posted a picture on Instagram and I asked you guys what you think. Many of you said keep going, it's gonna be fine. Some of you said to do a massive plyback test, which I did. So I took like 2 meters long piece of singles and then I folded 3 times to do it into like a 3-ply. And at that time I thought, it's gonna be fine. It kind of looked okay. But I left it all just to rest. I wanted to sleep on it, and the next day I looked at those at that plyback test, and I was like, this is a mess. It just doesn't look right. So what I decided to do, I finished that bat still, and I decided to chain ply it. So if you chain ply it because you're creating more of a gradient, then hopefully, then I was hoping that it wasn't going to turn into so much of a muddy mess. But what the yarn ended up looking, and I was so glad that I stopped spinning that bat, it just ended up looking like this. So it's a mess. I mean, this is just so muddy and chaotic, and I don't like it. And this is a chain ply, so imagine what this was going to look like if I went for a completely crazy 3 singles traditional 3-ply. It would just be a mess. So this bat, I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. Other people suggested to perhaps pair those singles with another strand of like a single color. So say like I was thinking to maybe do a bobbin of singles in a natural color and then apply it with this. But I don't know, like this is crazy, and I don't know how to save it because it would be a waste to obviously like throw it away. But yeah, that was an experiment that didn't go well, and this was another lesson that I learned the hard way, but that's how I learn best. I have to make those mistakes. What I did, however, because as you can see, I still have some of this fiber that's uncarded, I decided to be a little bit mindful of the colors that I'm putting on my carder. My carder is not particularly wide or massive, but it did fit 3 colors. So what I decided to do next is I made a bat that was a little bit more organized. And I think this could be a way to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip this fiber into thinner pieces, and then I'm going to spin them by color. And I think then we might end up with something that's less of a mess. So I think this is what I'm going to do next. I'm going to spin this bat into singles and then maybe chain ply it, or maybe I'm going to make another of those bats and then strip it in a slightly different way, and then I do a traditional 2-ply. I don't know. I'm still learning. I'm still playing with color. Processing my own fiber and then dyeing it and then spinning is something completely new to me. So yeah, I'm learning. But this is what's currently happening. I actually have nothing on my wheel right now as we speak because this went off the wheel literally yesterday, and I'm a little bit stuck. But yeah, maybe I'm just going to proceed to spinning these into singles, and then I'll just keep processing the fiber and see what I end up with. I was thinking to maybe dye the rest of the fiber with some natural dyes. I have recently got 2 books, which are, I can see them from here, but I can't be bothered to get up, so I'm gonna put the pictures on the screen to show you which books I got. Books on natural dyeing, and I was thinking to maybe do some natural dyeing on the rest of the fiber that I have, but I still have quite a lot of fiber. And from this experience of dyeing with natural dyes, not that I have a lot, but it always feels like you need to have quite a lot of the dye stuff to actually get some nice, intense colors. And I don't really have that much of anything. I mean, I've been collecting onion skins for quite some time. I have a big bag of that, so maybe I could dye the rest of the fiber with onion skins. But yeah, we'll see. But in terms of dyeing, yes, so the books that I got, I would like to experiment a little bit more. I've got some undyed skeins of yarn, which I would like to experiment with. So at the moment I am picking up some hollyhock flowers. We have a hollyhock plant in my garden, which I don't know how it got there. I mean, I can't remember us planting it there, but then you never know. But it's massive, and it's in such a random place that I kind of feel tempted to like dig it out and put it somewhere else. But it's producing loads and loads of those dark purple flowers. So I've been picking them, and I'm hoping that maybe I can dye some yarn with it. The book that I'm going to show on the screen now, because I can't remember the title from the top of my head, but this book is really good one. So from the 2 that I got, I actually prefer this one because it's got loads and loads of recipes for different types of plants. So if you are thinking of diving into the world of natural dyeing, I would highly recommend it. Actually, I'm going to reach out for that book because there is something that I wanted to show you that I really like about it. So there it is. What I really like about this book is that it's not particularly thick, right? It's not a huge book, but it's so condensed. You've got so much information. You've got quite a lot about the history of dyeing and, like, you know, some background stories. And it does cover dyeing like dyeing wool, but also the plant fibers, so that's great as well, because I've got some white cotton which hopefully I could dye as well with natural dyes. But what I really love about this book is that it really has loads and loads of pages with examples of specific plants which are good for dyeing, and here on the side you've got like the color samples that you can get from different pieces of the plants. Okay, so these ones actually just have one type of dyeing material, but like say you've got this plant here, you can use leaves and then you can use twigs, for example, from the same plant. So different plants, you can use different parts of different plants to give you loads of results, and it gives you a sample of the colors that you could get, and it also explains like how to achieve these colors, because in some cases you want to use the mordant, in some cases you may want to put it into an iron bath after the dyeing process, and then it's going to end up in yet a different shade. So I absolutely love this book. The other one is great as well, but I feel like the other one is more, it's a bit more general. It doesn't have that many examples, and it's got like knitting patterns and I don't want to say unnecessary stuff, but I kind of feel like it. It's like, this is a guide, you know, step by step, all very condensed, just information, information, information. The other one is more like here's the story, you know, here's the background, here's the general information, and here are some random patterns. Like, I don't want patterns in this book. I'm gonna choose the knitting patterns later on myself. Like, I just want the instructions and simple information. So this is more my kind of book, and I know I'm going to use it a lot, and I'm really excited about dyeing with oak. So we've got a big oak tree in our garden. Perhaps you probably saw it in the video that I inserted when I was processing the fiber. You can probably see the oak tree in the background at one point. With oak tree, you can use so many pieces of the oak tree to do some dyeing. So you can dye it with leaves, you can dye it with bark, you can dye it with acorns and with the oak galls. I have seen all of them on the oak tree across the years that we lived here. As it turns out, oak trees don't produce acorns every year, and I didn't know that. So when we moved here 2 years ago, in autumn, we had plenty of acorns. The year after that, there was none, so I was really surprised. This year, I can see the acorns growing already, so I'm super excited about that. So I will be following the recipes from this book, and I'm going to do some natural dyeing, and I will obviously let you know and report on how that goes. So that's all I had for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will reach out and say hello. I'm around on Ravelry and on Instagram as Magda Knits with double S, and I'm looking forward to your comments under this video. I really do hope that YouTube doesn't decide to delete them, because I really enjoy reading them. So yeah, thank you so much guys, and I will see you next time. Bye!